perspective, the work of the operation of the imagination in perception, cognition, and understanding. The classical way of doing this, since I'm also interested in how this is basically a discussion of the shortcomings of science and how this opens the door to certain kinds of manipulation of public opinion. And so the classical sources for this are Immanuel Kant, the Critique of Pure Reason, in which he gives a presentation of the structure of cognition, the structure of perception, the structure of understanding, and also its limitations. The third critique, the critique of judgment, is really of quite crucial importance to this operation, to Kant's model, because the way Kant presents the structure of cognition, the structure of perception, the structure of the mind, which is based in Aristotelian logic, the way he presents it, well, it doesn't operate automatically, right? Not everybody thinks at the same level, has the same concepts as other people. And so, from his perspective, it is arguably the power of the imagination that makes the mind work. It is the power of imagination that makes objects appear to us, that makes it possible to form concepts. And I don't have as much, well, it's a difficult conversation is what I mean to say. And so the presentation here sort of sets the stage for further work. I have, 50, 60, 70 pages of notes, but I haven't been able to find just the way I want to bring them together to complement this kind of a discussion properly. And so what I'll do is I will make a presentation that sets the ground, that outlines some of the basic problems for work that I have in progress. And then we can discuss the issue of the imagination and its role in everyday life later on after the presentation is over. So if that's okay with you, with that as a bit of a preparation, this is what we'll do. Okay. An unresolved issue of outstanding importance facing all of science today, not least of all the social sciences, is that the methods used to gain understanding of the world in which we live conceal its nature, in fact, and hide its truth from us. The problem that this creates for the humanities and social sciences in particular is that the scientist operates with methods that conceal the nature of the scientist from herself. Moreover, this includes the nature of the communities in which scientists and scholars live and work. The theoretical basis of this general problem is that science, in a general sense, seeks to understand the world, both social reality and so-called natural reality, solely as an object that has been abstracted from the world of experience. Now, there's obviously a positive value in this because we're talking about modern science, the Galilean science, right? And the modernity resides upon the change in knowledge that became possible, the change in technology that became possible with the emergence of mathematized science, a mathematized scientific method on the part of Galileo. But we must nevertheless not overlook the fact that the new type of scientific knowledge that was developed in this matter obviously gave rise to a type of dualism that has marked European intellectual life ever since, insofar as what is termed the mental or spiritual experience was subsequently removed to a realm separate from the world that is accessible to science. Indeed, the first attempt to clearly articulate the character and significance of the scientific approach to the world that we still utilize today, which we find in the work of Descartes, clearly and distinctly postulates that the so-called external world has a completely different nature and set of attributes that the world of the mind, man does the world of the mind. More importantly, it is not only the world as is extended in space and time that is accessible to knowledge by the use of the method of science. So, the mathematics, geometry at the hands of Galileo, as it was understood by Descartes and further developed by Kant, can only talk about the external world, can only talk about things, physical things in space and time. Mental and spiritual experience have thereby been removed to a sphere that is separated from the concerns of science. Stated otherwise, the Galilean or modern method of science abstracts the mental or spiritual from the world of objects, so that the latter can be studied as purely ideal entities that have no history, culture, or language. However, the often useful results obtained through such abstraction are then posited as the very truth of the world itself. And this means that science has forgotten that they are merely results of the implementation of a method aimed at a very specific type of results. The modern scientific method thus takes for granted the validity of a particular tool for accessing a particular type of knowledge as the tool for acquiring knowledge as such. That is to say that what may be termed the world of the mind cannot be known by the new scientific methods that are associated with the work of Galileo, which continue to provide the basis for science as it now exists, as it continues to exist. It is thus impossible to acquire what is now regarded as scientific knowledge of the world of experience, insofar as experience is inseparably bound to what are commonly referred to as mental and spiritual activities. This problem haunts the social sciences as well. For example, the work of no less a figure than Emil Durkheim explicitly aimed to establish sociology as a positivist science of social facts. Within this framework, even relationships and actions are to be regarded as facts external to the observer, who is to investigate them as objects in an external world. The seriousness of this difficulty is underlined by the historical emergence of transcendental philosophy in response to the need to find a sound theoretical foundation for the new method of science, for the new method of Galilean science. For example, Kant's critical transcendental philosophy examines how nature, as is extended in time and space, is accessible to knowledge through the application of a method that approaches it as essentially comprising purely objective geometrical and mathematical entities. But the degree of validity that pertains to such an approach is rooted outside of the extended world as such, and when the Kant defines as the transcendental realm of conscious reality, which itself is neither extended in time and space, nor accessible to knowledge on the basis of geometry and mathematics. Indeed, space and time, as constitutive of extended reality, evolved from the a priori structure of perception and understanding, which is dependent upon the structure of what we may refer to here as mental reality. Furthermore, Kant maintains that transcendental reality is accessible only through the critical method, which examines the a priori conditions of experience, and not through the scientific method, which utilizes a method that is essentially based on quantification and may be described in Kantian terms as uncritical in character. And so there's certainly an irony here, because Kant, who felt himself obliged, responsible for, driven to find a sound theoretical basis for the new type of science that had emerged, finds himself in a situation of limiting science, showing how it only restricts itself, how it only operates, how it only works in certain kinds of circumstances. And furthermore, he finds the theoretical basis for science not in the world that science investigates, but in the pre-reflective world of consciousness and in the reflective world of conscious understanding. So science itself cannot justify itself. The methods that science used to obtain knowledge cannot expose, cannot reveal what is the basis, why modern science works. Kant explicitly states, moreover, that knowledge has a moral function, that knowledge is tied to a moral reality, to the sense that there are values and meanings in life that are reducible to mathematics. He states, in fact, in the Critique of Pure Reason, that insofar as this concerns our action with reference to the highest aims of life, we see that the ultimate intention of nature and her wise provision was really, in the constitution of our reason, directed to moral interests only. And so modern science, which claims to be value-free, which claims to not operate with subjective meaning of any sense, Kant says that the aim of reason is, in fact, moral interests, right? But these moral interests are not accessible to scientific knowledge. It's good to remind ourselves that David Hume held an even more restricted view than considering the nature of modern scientific knowledge, insofar as he maintained that mathematics and logic are closed systems and disguised tautologies, which are only concerned with the relations between ideas. That is, with analysis of our concepts. They have no relation to the world whatsoever. Mathematics and logic for Hume had no relation to the world of experience. However, Hume maintains that the world is accessible to us only through experience. And this is tantamount to an admission that science in its present form makes an absolute separation between the knower and that which is to be known. Hume further remarks that we can never be capable of making moral judgments based on reason, because reason deals only with facts and draws conclusions from them. Reason cannot lead us to choose one option over the other. So Kant says that the highest value of reason lies in its search and in its support of moral interests. And Hume argues, that reason is not useful in any kind of a moral judgment. So stated otherwise, Hume argues that the predicament facing modern science is further complicated by the fact that the world, as science defines it, is an abstract world consisting of ideal constructions that does not correspond to the world we live in and experience, insofar as the world constructed in accordance with logical principles and rules. So science, as Hume sees it, and of course Hume is one of the standard bearers for the empirical method of knowledge, he says it cannot consist of human interactions and social relations by the very fact that science abstracts from the world of experience in order to derive a world of ideal objective realities that can be manipulated by the new method of science. Now, there's a further irony in this, because Hume argues that modern science can deal only with ideal realities. It deals only with ideal construction. Now, this takes us back to a time before Aristotle. This is in effect is a claim that modern science can only deal with ideal realities and is therefore akin to something like Platonism. And modern scholars, modern thinkers, modern scientists, if you will, certainly do not consider Platonic knowledge to be scientific knowledge. They consider it to be important to the history of knowledge, but pre-scientific, pre-objective, and as such, interesting for historical purposes. So the quandary we're describing arises from the fact that what was developed as a method or tool for obtaining a specific type of knowledge came to be inappropriately utilized as a tool for discovering the supposedly ontological nature of the world itself. Ideal constructions representing objective reality as is completely abstracted from all mental and spiritual experience, not least of a culture and language, came to be taken as the nature of the world in its totality. And as the modern social sciences began to emerge, such as with the work of Comte, for example, they adopted this general method of science because of the view that they would thereby be able to become authentic or general sciences. And these developments took place in spite of the fact that Descartes and Kant, among others, had clearly and distinctly indicated, first, that the world could not be reduced to spatially extended being, and second, that the method of Galilean science was pertinent only to purely objective reality, not subjective or conscious reality. That's to say that although the so-called truths of science are ideas or ideal realities, they have come to be taken as the world of experience. And it's the world of experience that in fact gave birth to these ideas. The two are not equal. The two cannot be substituted one for the other, the world of experience and the world of scientific ideas. Such confusion renders unintelligible the world that science claims to reveal in its meaning and truth. It also hides the meaning of science from the scientist, as well as the meaning of the experience of the scientist herself, because the scientist is made to reflect upon herself as an object. We thus come face to face with the paradox that the discovery of reality comprises the concealing of reality. Moreover, as this discovery concealing of reality came to be increasingly interpreted as the revealing of reality, the new method of science came to be applied to the exploration of mental reality as well, not merely so-called external nature and society. And so the assumption was made, the jump was made from using this method to explore external reality in space and time, as Descartes and as Galileo himself indicated. This method came to be regarded as not only important for, but even essential to the exploration of social realities, spiritual realities, mental realities. Nicholas Newman introduced second-order cybernetics into sociology in order to deal with such difficulties in the hope that the observer might be able to acquire knowledge about another observer. However, the problem to be resides within the method itself. It is not associated with the nature of what or whom we observe. It's with the nature of the tools we use to make observations. It's connected with the very essence of how we think knowledge is to be acquired. When the scientific method is used in this manner, it generates a type of one-dimensional uncritical thinking. This constitutes a type of one-dimensional science that endeavors to take all that it finds in the world of perception, including those who practice sciences, as pure objects extended in space and time. Nevertheless, even the notion of temporal extension or change over time is not adequate for taking into consideration human history and the cultural objects of study, including social relations and facts, insofar as the latter involve values, which is a type of meaning that has been specifically excluded from the pale of science. Because of such valueless one-dimensionality, we are justified in referring to this type of science as a type of irrationalism, in the sense that it distorts the nature of reason and its role in the world. This is the case with both the natural sciences and the social sciences, although for our purposes, of course, we're more affected by the fact that the social sciences are thereby distorted as well. It's useful at this point to recall a cogent remark by the Czech thinker Jan Patočka, but concerning the crisis of European sciences that Husserl addressed in his last works, namely that the crisis of science is in fact a crisis of humanity, which renders us blind and no longer able to understand. Patočka strongly argues, that what we may refer to within the present discussion as objective reason is an expression of the abject and thoroughgoing alienation of human existence as a whole in respect to the degradation of Western civilization. And so Patočka presents modern science as a degradation of civilization, so in the sense that it leads us so far away from an understanding of what reason should be concerned with. And so in this sense, purely objective knowledge is in fact alienation. There are two primary reasons for the state of affairs. First, science is no longer concerned with the nature of reason as such. This is in sharp contrast with the classical notion of rational knowledge, which was reborn during the Renaissance, whereby growth in knowledge would lead to the realization of human nature. Science was then understood to be a means for recovering the meaning of the world we perceive and experience, along with our location within it. And both the universe as a whole and man's place within it were viewed as being amenable to human reason. It was hoped, even expected, that the new method of obtaining knowledge would eventually produce a universal knowledge of the world, which would render us better able to move forward in the fulfillment of life in a more just society. Science was thus not always marked by lack of concern with the interrelatedness of knowledge in human experience. It did not always seek to rigorously ground truth solely in pure ideal objects, no consideration whatsoever for their history and their culture. An essentially ahistorical approach to the object, which also attempts to take the subject as a pure object, cannot grasp the meaning, the sentimented meaning that comes from language and culture and history. Moreover, this type of approach can provide no access to the origin of historical meaning and value that resides within the object as such. One-dimensional knowledge frequently endeavors to cancel the history and culture of objects, which in fact create the rationality of objects, not least because objectivity presupposes not only subjectivity, but more specifically, historical and cultural experience and social interaction. In addition, such a lack of concern with reason, taken to be a totality of both objective and subjective existence, has reduced science itself to technology and industry, with knowledge now being little more than the stuff upon which engineering is to be exercised. Science is no longer concerned with our place in the world. This is an inevitable consequence of the implementation of a strict mathematical method that is ahistorical, acultural, and apersonal. On the one hand, the method of knowledge has become identified as essentially calculation. More importantly, such operations are no longer performed in a manner that is fully conscious of the history of how they were developed, and this hides their meaning. Science practiced in this manner is unable to address larger ontological and even epistemological questions concerning the nature of experience, insofar as unconcerned with the nature of the role of reason in the world. Interesting example of these kinds of problems is provided by the work of A.J. Ayer, who is known to be very science. He's supportive of science. He champions the cause of science in a traditional kind of sense, but he also was a renowned humanist. Ayer, who was in general agreement with Schleck and the Vienna Circle, and he maintains it is meaningless to address with a serious scholarly interest the whole of ethics, metaphysics, theology, and aesthetics, since they are not matters that can be judged as being true or false. He thus so restricts the meaning of knowledge in the name of what he takes to be science, that large parts of what traditionally have been called philosophy are forced outside the scope of knowledge and regarded as nonsense. This, in fact, applies to any issue that refers to meaning and values, insofar as they do not permit of a strict true-false answer. But to Ayer's remarks serve to warn us not of the shortcomings of speculative philosophy, ethics, aesthetics, but rather of the narrowness of science, as is represented by the approach that has been adopted in the natural sciences. Was Ayer a noted advocate of secular humanism, in effect speaking to us in the voice of Kant? Did his position objectively comprise the claim not that what we may term the humanistic sciences are unscientific and as such possess little truth value, but rather that science cannot address these disciplines and is unable to capture their meaning? So there's a choice. You either say that aesthetics and history and ethics and so on are meaningless, or you have to say that the tool you're using fails when you attempt to approach these disciplines, when you attempt to approach these bodies of knowledge. Okay, to conclude, the system of science as a whole, in the form it has taken in its development from the time of Galileo, subverts the meaning of reason and rational knowledge. Not only is it unable to describe the world we perceive in its totality as we experience it, it in fact postulates that we can know the knowing subject herself only as a pure object, stripped of the values and meanings that are inherent in experience as such. This cancels the space in which reason and rational knowledge are possible, insofar as it identifies reason only with one pole of the subject-object continuum that characterizes life itself. In respect to sociology, Luhmann formulated the state of affairs as the impossibility of the social sciences to observe society as a whole. In addition, the identification of reason with a pure object raises the danger that the human subject can become controlled by the power of the object, in which social relations and history are embedded, regardless of scientific prejudice to the contrary. This opens the door to what I would refer to in philosophical terms as the ontological domination of the subject by the object, which has a host of social and even political consequences. That is to say that when the knowing subject is reduced to a pure object, the subject becomes possessed by the object, dominated by the object, and subject to the object. It is the object that becomes the active pole in knowledge. The subject only presents a certain basis for the object to reveal itself. The notion that an active subject somehow synthesizes knowledge, somehow synthesizes objects in the sense of things with histories, things as processes, not simply as things as facts. This is all gone. This has been removed from the discourse, from the discussion of the nature of science, what science is supposed to do. And so we're living in an age in which science proposes that the knower is essentially an object. This is nothing less than an abandonment of the meaning of knowledge and reason. That, moreover, constitutes a submission to and domination by the object. Such possession of the subject by the object negates the self-determination of the apparently knowing subject. It negates the status of perception and experience. It uncritically identifies mind with fact, and it uncritically identifies imagination and hope with the ability to acknowledge the reality, to merely acknowledge the reality of the external world precisely as it is now. It may thus lead to the subject becoming incapable of transcending facts and incapable of transcending the pure object. As Husserl reminds us, fact-minded science makes for fact-minded people, and, as Kant may add, for people without imagination. And so, that's where we'll leave it today. And that's where I'll leave the presentation today. And I'm interested in seeing what you have to say. Any comments?
It was brilliant. It was brilliant. I'm sorry I had to leave for 6 minutes, but I believe this is more philosophy than sociology.
Oh,
and
it's not.
Within sociology would be sociology of knowledge, or sociology of science, which would be the same. But I believe that these, your work and these kinds of work, they are fundamental. They are fundamental because all the problems, or at least the way I see it, all the problems that we have nowadays, it's a problem between the reality out there, which is the same for all of us, and the reality that we understand as a person, subjectively understand and comprehend the world. So each one of us has a different reality in our minds, because the way we represent it, because of the experiences we've lived. This is pure social psychology. And I think this is brilliant, because you don't come from social psychology, you come from the theorists, which is amazing. You make the other turn to get to the same topic. And if we don't make these questions, nobody else in science will. I think it's up to us to become more critical about how science is making us understand the world, and how knowledge is being built from, how can I say, unmaterialistic elements. For example, knowledge is being produced over knowledge, and knowledge over information over knowledge. As you said, the world of experience is away from us. It's not part of our our grasping, of our understanding the world, right? And so in this regard, I believe this is amazing. your method is only literature. It's only literature. It's just these big literatures. Do you plan on taking this further?
Well, I mean, of course, I'm interested in pushing this further because you see, if the question of how we know and how that's related to what exists, if that question is misunderstood, if that question is pushed in a direction that is not fully adequate to what we have to do, if it leaves moral questions out of the range of discussion, if it overlooks historical processes, if we don't have a tool that's capable of revealing that, objects are not things, and by that I mean, things are just facts without objects have a process. Objects are in flux. Objects are social realities, whereas things are, they're devoid of meaning. They're simply just there. If we do not have the tools adequate for this kind of thing, then we certainly are not in a position to deal adequately with social problems. And so, that's the issue of greatest concern to me. Right? We have to be able. Do we have the tools that make it possible for us to know the things we have to know and understand if we are going to resolve the kinds of social problems that are existing today around us, right? And this includes issues of alienation. You have to know what's going on. You have to be able to have, sound knowledge of what's happening before you can make decisions. If all you have are statistics, that doesn't get you very far, does it?
No, it doesn't.
Well,
no, it doesn't.
When I was listening to you, I thought of a book that I just recently translated by an Argentine guy who writes about human-animal relations. And he makes a similar critique with a lot of references to philosophy. He's not a social scientist, really. Well, I don't know what his academic background is. Maybe he studied philosophy in Argentina, but I felt similarly to some similar issues came to my mind, which is I do understand the critique, but I have to admit it sounds a bit dated to me because it doesn't seem to me that this is the paradigmatic way of doing social sciences today. So, maybe when sociology was largely functionalist and positivist, that was when the Frankfurt School and other people were making this kind of critique of positivist sociology. But now, there's been this subjective turn, there's been sociology of the body, of the emotions, plus a whole ethnographic thrust, which was always anthropological, but sociology has embraced. And plus, I do a lot of work as a translator for people who work in social history and microhistory. So we're just talking about experience all the time. So, my question is, to what kinds of social science, where would this kind of critique, because it is valid, but I just don't see it as being the kind of social science that I see being done around me through, all these years that I have been in the university. But maybe there are contexts that are still, quantitative and positivistic, and that don't converse with the kind of social science that I am involved with. And maybe there's another problem with extreme subjectivism,
Sure.
Right? Because that's the way I felt when I was translating this Argentine guy's work on human-animal relations, which, by the way, it was hard for me to translate without
like throwing up my hands in despair because he is taking advantage of the emotional appeal that his work has and throwing it out to lay persons who are like, you know, they say here animalistas, like basically vegans, that vegan type thing. So when he invokes this critique of positivist enlightenment perspectives, he does it and as a way of saying, well, it's kind of weird, but the bottom line might be that for him, you know, he delves so into emotion and perception, and there's kind of a rejection of human exceptionalism. So it, you know, it's like he really negates human, the way it all develops, it's like our rational ability to work with the world and life experience is a rationalization for the exploitation of the sentiments and needs and emotions of these non-human beings. So yeah, I mean, it is something that concerns me, but I ask about, you know, I mean, so much of this seems to me to have been what social sciences have been challenging since like when I was maybe an undergrad and studying sociology in Mexico.
So that's my question.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting point, and it certainly is a valid question. But you know, I don't. You know, I work on the border between social sciences, history, social sciences. Theoretical philosophy, and well, you know, the majority of sociologists today aren't even interactionists, right? You know, I mean, what's the membership of the Society for the Study of Symbolic Interaction in the United States? I don't know, 350 or something, and half of them, think that, mead is the last word and reflection upon human existence. Right? So this is, talking about, Kant is not particularly sexy, right? And Descartes, a lot of people don't even know how to spell his name. But in Husserl, of course, Husserl in the continental tradition, Husserl has been, the most important, theoretician for the large area, for a large branch of the social sciences. And, his claim, right, as Patočka, who was a Charter 77 person, unable to work for years in the Czech Republic, and so on, a political activist, right? Patočka says that we're not just talking about, intellectual traditions here. He says thinking in this way and thinking that knowledge, that this is what knowledge is, that's a perversion of the values of civilization. That's a perversion that's an abject denial of what people claim that European civilization is about. And, that's, I mean, that wasn't written yesterday, but, it wasn't written in the 1950s either, right? So the American Philosophical Association, how many thousands and thousands of members of it does it have, right? They're like the World Congress of Sociology, in size. When you go to one of their big major international conferences, they don't even have a formal relationship with organizations that want to discuss symbolic interaction. Right. So, I mean, to say that some of what I've said is dated, well, I'm not going to argue about that too much, because after all, I'm talking about Husserl, for example. But I think it's still a real problem. I think it's still very much a real problem. And depending on where you work, it's different from country to country, of course, right? But depending on where you work, to be a social scientist, it's better to know mathematics than a human language, right? Unless you consider mathematics human language, right? You know, the statistics, you know, sure, you know, I like reading statistical works, you know, I translate and edit a lot of them myself. But what, yeah, what purpose does this stuff serve, right? I mean, it doesn't question, you know, some of these, it doesn't address some of the basic questions that I wanted to raise. And, you know, if you have had the experience, I of course have had the experience too, you know, of working in the social sciences and having people talk about things in a different kind of way. When that happens to me, I almost feel as if I've been blessed by the grace of some higher power, because it doesn't happen very often. Certainly not here where I'm sitting now, right? You know, you aren't even. I mean, I remember delivering a lecture to a group of undergraduate students some time ago, and when I was talking about alternative views of political science, such as those that take into consideration values, cultural values, you know, meaning specific to certain communities, there were a couple of people who got up and walked out of the room because they thought that was non-scientific to talk about, you know, values in the meaning of a personal experience or community experience, you know, when you're talking about political science, right? So, you know, I mean, I think it's still worthwhile to, I mean, I didn't quote a source that was published in 2023. Of course I'm not. Of course I didn't do that. But I think these questions still exist. And carry weight. I think the problem's still there. Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure it is in certain milieu, but I would definitely not say that that is our major problem, or even on the list of the major problems in the way sociology is done in Brazil.
Because
Okay.
I mean, that after all is the academic context that I know, where, you know, people go out into the field. As I said, the thrust is really it's very ethnographic or field work, being out there, experiencing with people, their reality, their world. Symbolic interactionism is popular, and that is something that I saw happen here in the 90s, in the late 90s, because when I got here, still the structuralist perspectives were really hegemonic, or, you know, maybe Marxist structuralist or Bordesian or whatever. And then Goffman became very popular, and he still is, maybe not as much. I mean, of course, there's tension like between the Goffmanian perspective and that of somebody like Foucault, who is more, he has actually a more macro theory of power, even though he talks about microphysics, but, you know, whatever. And then, like I said, in history, it's microhistory, the history of daily life. And then my colleagues who used to be more Marxist structuralists, at least some of them, and they didn't even want to hear about cultural studies, but now they're open to cultural studies. And one of them in particular got on the bandwagon of sociology of the emotions and the body. I mean, I don't know how well they do it, but this is what people are doing. In philosophy, probably that is not the case. For example, okay, well, I don't know, but I know that one writer, somebody whose work I liked a lot whose work I used a lot when I was working on sociology of the body, is somebody from philosophy. But then again, she's unconventional because she's a feminist philosopher. So Susan Bordo, you probably know her work. So, you know, I often said to my students, well, when I read somebody like Susan Bordo, she could be a sociologist. I don't know what makes her so different from a sociologist. But then I'm certain that she is that a particular kind of philosopher. And then in political science, well, I don't know, because the people that I know in Brazil who are political scientists or who do political sociology are sort of down at some of them work at the micro level. and others maybe meso or something, like they're involved in political institutions, but I wouldn't say that they are their work. I'd say that, you know, they roll up their sleeves and get their hands dirty, you know, with the nitty gritty of daily life and all of the struggles and conflicts and interest groups. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess I've always thought to myself, darn, I used to like philosophy, but I am so glad that I went, you know, the route that I did that took me into this kind of ethnographically influenced sociology, and also my context. Well, of course, literature is another thing, but to some extent, but like my experiences with people in history, the work that they do. For example, Maeda's book on the Italian immigrants who came to Brazil at the end of the 19th century, I translated it from, it's a Routledge title, it's Power in the Village. And she works with this Carlo Ginzburg's model, which is microhistory. So it's experience, and then has to face the methodological challenge, like how do you uncover experience when you're talking not about, you know, what's going on now, or even what happened, you know, how people lived and felt about things 20 years ago, but you're talking about times where, you know, what kinds of documents do we have that we can, how to read those documents so that we can reach people's experience from that time. So, you know, I mean,
Well, fortunately, it doesn't seem at all like what you described, but that, I don't mean to say that what you describe doesn't happen. I guess I just feel glad to be sort of moving through spaces where, I mean, there are plenty of other issues. A lot of complicated stuff about identity, you know.
That's a problem, as a matter of fact, because a lot of knowledge about social questions, personal questions, historical questions has been reduced to, you know, identity politics, right? People don't even talk about large issues often, but they, you know, talk about much smaller kinds of issues and leave the bigger picture just out there someplace, right? You know.
Yeah, and in a sense, that is like taking at face value certain types of feelings and subjectivities that are expressed. So it's almost going in the opposite direction, right? Rather than rational object, everything becomes subjective experience without any other kinds of transcending criteria that we
Well,
can
of course, that's the other side of the coin, right? If there is no valid model for how you obtain knowledge, how you verify knowledge, what knowledge is, and so on, then people go off in the direction you just indicated, right? They get lost someplace, right? You know, in some private place, in some very small place, you know, that has a value to discuss, of course, but it also is not in the position to preside or to provide answers to more than certain types of questions. But I agree. I mean, I appreciate much of what you're saying. I certainly do, right? You know.
Excellent.
Just good to be able to think these things through, right? Together, of course, always.
Yeah.
This is excellent. I like how this debate is going. Now, Dirk, you have the word, and then Vesela.
Can you hear me? It might be
Yes.
a very bad tone. I'm sitting in the train. Couldn't make it, so I'm sorry. Excuse me not coming before, but I had some duties at the university. Thank you very much from this, what I heard, Andrew. And it reminded me also, like Miriam said, on the positivism dispute. And I also had, reading the one-dimensional thing, I only had a lecture about one-dimensional science. I think it was a very, very abstract talk, and I really liked it. And I think it goes maybe much more than the dialectic of enlightenment goes. It goes a little more further in what is the meaning of science and where we should go to. But the thing is, and then I would like to go to Miriam's talk, because I think there's something happened from the positivism dispute to now. We have much more, that's right, more, let's see, qualitative methods, much more experience, more body in this. But the question is, what does it use for? Is it heard? So there is a voice of qualitative, of much more body speaking, much more sensitive search. But the question is it heard? And I think it's like the postmodern paradigm. Everyone is talking, but nobody is listening, especially not the ones in power. Because when we now see, for example, especially in science, universities are closing. When they're closing, there are departments of social science, humanities are closing. That is a problem, because the question is, when we talk about knowledge, the question is, what do we mean when we talk about knowledge? Who is the power structure behind it, and what does it help to do what? And so I would say with Andrew, we can talk about a reification of science, a reification of how to use this kind of science. When the thinking in the modernity process was, with the help of knowledge, we go on and can maybe, and that is very naive thinking, go with progress can change humans and humans living in conditions to a better. We've seen in the face of capitalism that it didn't go in this direction. What's now happening, it's just more or less just a progress to destroy humanity. So so I would say it's much more, we are in an even worse phase than we have been talking with critical theory in it. So, and I think the question is where we go with this, and where we, I didn't hear the first part of the talk, so I can just adapt to the last thing. But I think we talk about the reification of science, and the question of how science is linked to the meaning of life. And this sounds maybe a little bit, yeah, problematic, but this is science should be about. I just would like to talk with, I think we also can talk with, I also heard something about aesthetics in it, because it also could be taking up much more things in it. What is science, what is not science? And talking with, in the course of modernity, science is always something was written in as really connected to technology. When we talk about oral talking and science and so forth, but there is no there is a lot of voice, but there is no hearing in it. So this is the problem. I think we have a lot of science that goes in the direction, and so I would say Miriam is right. But these people don't. The voice is not heard by the people in power. So this knowledge is going to nowhere.
You know, here in Uppsala, well, first of all, this was the university that refused to give Foucault a PhD because they didn't think his work was serious, right? But it's, you know, one of the largest and the oldest universities in Northern Europe, you know, and 70% of the students, 70% of the research funding is in the technical science, not even the natural science, the technical science, right? And so, you know, not only is it a question of, you know, closing, the departments of language and not requiring language education as part of certain kinds of programs, I mean, 70% in technical sciences, right? This is not, I mean, they aren't interactionists, you know what I mean? I mean, they aren't talking about, the social problems in a way that, you know, makes a lot of sense to me, right? You know, a social problem is, you know, municipal sewage. That's a social problem, you know. I mean, where do you buy the pipes? You know, who's the supplier for the water that you use to flush the systems and stuff? You know, I mean, these are, I mean, some discussions of social issues seldom get beyond that. We aren't even talking about physics or biology or chemistry. We're talking about the technical side, What do you do with the chemistry? What do you do with the physics?
Excellent, Vesela. You have the word. Vesela, there is something wrong with your audio, with your microphone.
You're muted.
Sorry.
Good.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, the presentation, I think, is in line with the question about how important is the team that our research committee actually is responsible for keeping alive in psychology. This is alienation. And so the question about knowledge and alienation, knowledge alienating us from reality, I think that should be seriously important. So you were used to technology and material for engineering and so on and so forth. So perhaps it sounds very abstract. But if you find the context, exactly as Miriam said, otherwise, it can be a little bit abstract and unrelated to anything that is important in technology today. It might be a little difficult, to maintain this kind of discussion. But if we find the context in which it takes place, then this will be a completely different issue. And I think that this is a wonderful possibility here to relate this kind of discussion to the question about artificial intelligence and especially GPT, as there are discussions here in our university lately, and this is really, we are on the verge of a revolution that is going to dismiss absolutely most of the conceptions that we have in psychology even about what is real, not real. So you're talking here about the possession of the subject by the object. Now, this is exactly what perhaps with this, linguistic tools and actually GPT. And also the relationship between subject and object that you also listed up here. So what is the new relationship? Who is the subject and who is the object? In line with the discussions that we had different seminars here. Is the computer, the interaction partner and the a kind of object that can play a role in the formation of the mind, the subject object, self and so on? Or is the computer to be the subject that is putting some kind of creating, our knowledge, on the basis of the fact that all kind of knowledge can be interpreted and summarized regarding depending on what kind of question we have asked the computer. And so if you put, in this context, your discussion, so I think that it would be really very interesting to continue make it more sociologically, relevant, because we are not going for long to talk about this kind of reality in which we have this pure emotion embedded, experience. So all this will be mediated, through computers and artificial intelligence. And this is a big threat even for sociology and science, that we have to liberate, put on completely different track our previous perspectives and knowledge, maybe. So I wonder what you say about this possibility. Andrew.
Actually, that's very fascinating and a very troublesome at the same time change. There recently here in Sweden, there have been a lot of discussions recently about the role of artificial intelligence in teaching, the role of artificial intelligence in student life, right? The capability of of electronic machines, to be our interaction partners, or the inability to distinguish between whether our interaction partner, has a pulse and blood pressure or watts and ohms, right? And so there have been some, just this week, there have been some meetings here in Uppsala. I've had the pleasure to participate in some of them, just on these kinds of points, right? Children, ordering their bedtime stories from a machine and having it read to them as they fall asleep. They didn't want the father, they didn't want the mother to come and read a fairy tale, right? They cranked up their language bots and said, give me 2 stories, 15 minutes apiece, so I can sleep in about 30 to 35 minutes. Now this is something, that's, I of course discuss these kinds of things. My presentation was really quite abstract. I admit it, but these are some of the things that I had in the back of my mind. The inability to, to recognize a human voice, the inability to recognize an expressed emotion as, is it an expressed emotion from the living person, or is it a simulated response from a bot working on a very, very large database? Right? Yeah. I don't know what to say about this, right? I find this troubling, right? Miriam just put up, that's, you just put up a context, a comment a few moments ago about how, what's, children being read to by machines and not knowing always whether it's a machine, that was sad, and if you're going to have non-human relations, do you want to have it with a machine, or do you want to have it with an animal, right? These are very pertinent issues, right? And my discussion, of course, addressed this all rather abstractly, right? But these are some of the things that, when I was reading this, I was remembering a conversation I had just a couple of days ago, about these kinds of things, right? How can, people talking about what the nature of knowledge is, if you can't tell whether the knowing subject is a human being or a machine. So I don't have any further, I don't know what else to say at this point in time.
Getting some reality. Which reality? Reality.
Yeah, exactly.
That's true. Dirk, you have your hand raised.
Yes, I just think it's maybe good to add that with the ongoing digitalization, we also have a really big problem, because we are losing much more this kind of sensitiveness, this kind of what basically are humans. Because when we are thinking about this, what Facebook and so are creating at the moment, that there is a kind of a interconnection between reality, but also kind of a second life, a kind of digitalized reality. And this also will just impact both. Also going into science again, that is, what is real life again? And that is quite the opposite what Miriam is saying with the kind of non-human relationship with animals. It's quite the opposite of how we experience ourselves. And this is going to be a groundbreaking thing in how people digitally experience themselves, and how this will go into in science and in to realize research, I guess we can't see the scope of it. It will change the whole thing of thinking when it's going this direction, or even when I think what also could be really possible, that there is much more a kind of a breakdown and a solid going back only to the kind of hard science, which is proposing much to only this than the digital thinking. So I'm seeing much more problematic future going where science is going at the moment too, with respect and with the argument that we need technology, plus 70% technology, technology to save the world, because all things that we talk about go over the catastrophe, the natural catastrophe we are facing at the moment, and we are going to face even more, is based on we have to invent much more technology and not we maybe should more act like humans. So I guess the problem we are facing is that how science is understood is going even more in the wrong direction, making the situation even worse.
I mean, well, there's no question, but that, things are changing, right? And they're changing rapidly. Of course, there have been analogous, chat bots, right? There have been analogous, in the general sense, events in previous human history. The jump from the spoken word to the written word, and then to the printed word, right? I remember when I was an undergraduate student, having a course in which the whole point of the course was how to talk with dead people, right? Having interactions with people and things that no longer exist, right? And of course, what he's talking about reading a book, right? And making notes as you read, right? Having an interaction with someone who's dead, right? And so it's not the same thing as having an interaction with an animal or an interaction with a machine, right? But to think of reading in that sense, the kind of cataclysmic change that printing brought about in the world, right? You didn't have to be with somebody to talk with them, right? You didn't have to, you didn't even have to know whether the person was alive to be able to think their thoughts, right? But now, of course, the change is, someone yesterday was talking to me, it was a joking conversation, but somebody yesterday was talking to me about, the time that, Gandhi and Elvis had dinner together, right? And so he pulls out, his image, its photographic quality, right? And Gandhi talking about, how much he likes Elvis' music, and Elvis standing there taking a selfie of himself next to Gandhi. I mean, it's ridiculous, of course, but this, the distinction between those kinds of things and what we've accepted for reality for at least a measurable period of time, they're certainly changing. Certainly changing. Make machines part of society as members of society, right? Not being able to tell if it's a machine or if it's a person. Right? Too much for me. Wow.
It's already for 5:30, 5:40, right? I believe that we should have opened this entire session, this entire year, with professor's work, because I believe that this is the start of everything else. I believe that when we talk about how knowledge is created in the reality, I believe that we should have opened with Andrew, and then we would have all those that are built upon this knowledge and this reality. I'm going to have this stuck in my head for a long time. How reality is not real, and This is from all the presentation. What I took is reality isn't real. Even though we learn from experiences, we have been learning more from other knowledge than from experience, personal, private experiences. Anyways, this is I cannot organize my ideas right now because there's lots of things going on. But we're going to talk more about it. I appreciate you all for being here. I know that we don't have the entirety of the people that usually come, but I appreciate you all for coming. Andrew, would you like to say a few words before we wrap it up?
Well, I don't know where to, I have some ideas of how I'd like to take this conversation further, but it's up to me to do it, right? And now, maybe over the course of the summer, I'll have an opportunity to, under the force of circumstances, which say, conference presentations and article deadlines and so on. Maybe I'll have the opportunity to bring these things a bit further along. But yeah, there's not any simple answers. Things are changing. And the one thing we shouldn't do is try to prevent the changes that are happening because they're happening. They aren't going to stop. Machines are going to become our friends, and they're going to be, members of society, and they'll probably vote and so on, right? They'll be our teachers, and they'll be our children. But the point is that, of course, to understand things as well as we can, and to try to make, decisions based upon, values, ideologies, understandings, reasons, concepts, to improve the situation, for all of us, for as many of us as we can. So, there's many different ways of approaching it, right? But, yeah, we have to walk pretty fast to keep up with the pace.
That's true.
We have to, well, I guess Miriam just left us, but we have to get together. We said this a couple of weeks ago. We were supposed to do this a couple of weeks ago. We have to get together, active members of RC36, members of the board, and we have to prepare an election. We have to, make other kinds of preparations for the World Congress. So, anybody have any suggestions about time? Who do we include? I guess we have to, first of all, before we open this kind of a discussion up to the membership at large, we have to prepare ourselves with ideas about what we'd like to do and how we would like to take the conversation to prepare for elections and things like this. So.
Yeah, but by the way, Dirk, perhaps you do not know, but David Embrick didn't register for the Congress.
It's really hard to understand you,
Yeah, David Embrick did not register for the Congress, which means that he's not presenting, he's not chairing any sessions, and he didn't tell us this. So I kept him to the last, the session. The chairing session, and so then Isabella informed me that actually he's not coming. He's not ready.
Yeah, but you can count on me with sharing, Ella, with organizing, so we can surely find this.
Yeah, I mean, everybody who is there can do it, but this was the last moment. I realized that he's not actually registered. So, and this is board member. It's very sad. Yeah.
I have difficulties to understand you, Tesla, really.
Yes, your audio is failing.
Really?
Yeah.
It's very.
But what I heard is that David is not participating, and I also read it in your mails. And I'm thank you for the work anyhow, organizing this. But the problem is we have to find a chair, and that is not the biggest problem. I think we have also to see.
No, I already myself and Andrew, because it was 11 o'clock, 1 hour before the deadline, and Isabella wanted names, so it's not a problem.
I didn't got it.
Can
Can maybe Andrew, Ella, or Umberto repeat it, because it's only the voice.
I didn't
only your
understand.
microphone.
It's
The issue is this. There was a bit of a crisis, and this was at the last minute, right? There was, it was about an hour before the deadline to finalize sessions. And Isabella notified us that David Emmerich hadn't registered for the Congress. And so he can't present, he can't chair, right? And so if
he's not participating.
he can't participate, I mean, I guess he can make a late registration to follow things along, but he can't participate actively, the deadline for speakers is passed. And so what she had to do, she spoke at, check things out with Isabel a little bit.
Yeah.
And, it was just no time to discuss with anybody. So I'll be chairing one of the sessions that he's organized. And I guess Vestal is going to be chairing the other session that he's organized, because we had to come up with 2 chairs and then there wasn't any time to talk to anybody.
Oh, you could have put me just in, but that's fine. We also can do it over there when it's.
Yeah, sure.
So that's always when there are other times. That's not a problem with me.
But
That's
the
a
thing is,
pity that we have to see when we go to elections, that we also call for people who go up for posts, that they also actively go do something. So these are the persons who were in charge, also with Michael, and they don't participate. Michael is also not coming. He has also a session with the other RC, but he told me 2 weeks ago that he will be needed. So this is a big problem, I think, when people lift their hand, but then when they're up here, when there's something to do, but then when the work has to be done, they never show up. So that we really have to look into that. I guess that is a big problem.
And you hear me, you say that Michael, was surprised that somebody included him in the session in a different committee. He didn't know about it.
Yeah, Michael claimed to have been surprised that he was put in the session in another committee. So.
And then don't show up. Yeah, that's.
Yeah. But I suppose we have to trim a couple people from the board. There are some people who've been around for a while who, haven't been active. A couple have been active. We need to have some new people as well, right? So, Roberto?
First of all, I am one of these new people. And second of all,
yes, there's no doubt about that.
And second of all, just
to elect you, so the people have to vote for you. So wait.
That's true. And second of all, I have a session at the research committee of social psychology about alienation, because they don't have anything about alienation in that research committee. My idea is to get the people who sent the works to there and to ask them to come to our research committee, So we are going to have 9 papers.
What? 9?
9 papers. But no, sorry. There were 9. There were 9. I didn't accept the 9 of them because there was like 4 of them who had nothing to do with alienation. And now it's only 5 remaining, but still 5 is a big number when we have what, 60 members, paying members, active members, right? So the idea here is to do marketing of RC36 at the RC14. And that's it. And I'll do my best to try to go, but that's what I told you. I have the fare, the flight ticket, but I don't have any other money to spend there on where to stay, where to eat, and how to live there. I can't, because I just have one scholarship during this stay in Madrid.
It was a mistake to be in Melbourne, but it's even, well, and of course, the situation became bad. Made maybe when they made the decision 7 or 8 years ago, maybe it looked interesting, maybe things didn't look so bad. I know from Sweden, the cost of travel to Melbourne has doubled since December.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it's interesting because Isa's office is in my faculty here in Madrid.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
So I run into Cecilia now since I met her, because of course I had seen her before, but I didn't know who she was. And then we went lunch together. And now that I know her, every day at the faculty, I see her. We meet.
Yeah.
And it's actually it's luck. It's good luck for me, right? Because in terms of networking, in terms of literature, in terms of opportunities, right? It's perfect to be here. It's perfect to be here. And she's very nice. She's very nice. And I told her about the three of you.
Oh,
We talked about RC36, we talked about what we're doing, and then talking alienation. And even though I know the books are delayed, but we still have the project, so the project counts. And
to get soon my article. My chapter.
Please.
Yeah.
And the idea is to make RC36 grow.
I should remind you of this, that last time we spoke, you said you were going to make some notes about annual report or report on activities. So
That's true. That's
I'll
true.
hold you to that.
I didn't do it. I have to be honest. I blanked because of Madrid, because of moving,
Sure.
because of everything, etc. As I told you, this week, this third week that I'm here, is the first week that I feel myself more comfortable. I have my laptop, I have my place to live, so now everything is getting back on track.
Yeah.
Let me see. By Monday, is that okay?
Oh, great.
Great.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So by Monday, I will tell everything we did this year. There's someone who wants to get in.
That's me.
Okay.
We're going to have to circulate some names amongst ourselves for people that we would be willing to nominate, willing to suggest, willing to work with as members of a board, and so on. And we should, why don't we do this?
Can we meet next week?
Yeah.
What time? What day of the week is better?
What's good for you, Vesla, Dirk?
I have to look.
Let's first circulate some names and then we meet and decide. Let's first come with a list of names.
Okay, amongst us, just some names for board members, things like that. Okay, yeah, sure. We can I'll talk. I have a chance to talk it over with you, Vesla. We could send some ideas to Dirk, see what Dirk has to say, you, Humberto, and then we could do that over the course of the next few days, and then find a day next week, and then we can, speak some specifics, right? Rather than do too much thinking out loud, so to speak.
Yeah.
What?
First, we have to have a list and then we meet and discuss.
Okay.
However, we could consider the same time, same day next week,
Sure.
as we are all here on Wednesday.
I have to check. I don't know.
We have today the 26th.
The 3rd. Yeah.
It is the 7th, right?
Let me check.
No, I'm in June.
May.
Let's see.
Next Wednesday is the 3rd.
Yeah.
Would be April 3rd.
May 3rd.
May 3rd, sorry, May 3rd.
Wednesday afternoon, I'm busy.
You're busy.
Good.
What? Yes.
Problematic again.
What is the best day of the week for both of you? Because my schedule is totally flexible.
Tuesday is fine, and Thursday is fine.
Thursday seems.
Thursday.
Mhm.
Andrew, how does it look for you?
Thursday should be fine. That's the 4th, right? No,
The 4th is better.
Yeah.
that should be okay.
May the 4th. Star Wars Day.
Okay, and same time, 4 o'clock, 16.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
I'll write it down.
Brilliant, brilliant. I will do the Zoom meeting and send to you guys the link.
Okay, okay. And meanwhile, we'll exchange some notes about.
Brilliant.
Okay.
Brilliant. Well, thank you all. It's very nice to see you. It's
very nice
amazing
to
to
see
see
you
you.
too.
It's amazing to see you, and to know that we're closer. We are one ocean closer.
Oh yeah, we're actually on the same continent. How about that?
We are one Atlantic closer.
We're really close now.
So now I must go to Sweden and to Denmark.
Yeah.
ASAP. I'll get the money from Australia and I'll share between Sweden and Denmark.
Okay.
Good. So
That's great
yeah.
to see you guys, thanks very much. We'll exchange some notes and then see each other next Thursday. Okay.
Yes,
Brilliant.
and sorry again to join so late.
Yeah.
No worries. We understand.
Yeah. Yeah. You all look great. So it was great meeting you. See you next week. Bye bye.
See you next Thursday. Bye.
All the best. Yeah. Bye.